Hello, everyone. Hope you had a good lunch and are now restored and ready for two more talks to end the day. I first want to introduce our next speaker, who is Dr. Tracy Vargas, and she will be talking about employees or suspects, surveillance and scrutinization of low-wage service workers in U.S. dollar stores. Can't wait. First, let me tell you about Tracy. Dr. Vargas is an assistant professor of sociology and criminal justice at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. As an ethnographer, Dr. Vargas's research interests focus on the sociology of work, low-wage labor, poverty, and class. So let Dr. Vargas take it away.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm incredibly happy to be here today. It's an honor to be invited. So, as I was introduced, I'm an assistant professor at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. Today, I'll be presenting on some of my ethnographic research on dollar stores, which I've been conducting for 9 years total. And I've titled my presentation, Dollar Store Economy, Reproducing Inequality Within the Organization of Retail Service Work. And as my disclosure statement, this project received partial funding from the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs at Syracuse University when I was a PhD student. So I began conducting this research in 2014 when I was a PhD student in the Department of Sociology at Syracuse University. My dissertation research was conducted under the guidance of labor scholar and ethnographer Dr. Gretchen Purser, a sociologist who also received her PhD from UC Berkeley in 2009. Shout out to Gretchen. And I wanted to share a little bit of background information about myself before I got started on this more formal presentation. I first became interested in this project because of my mother, which is fitting since Mother's Day will be coming up shortly. My mother was a low-wage worker herself in retail service work when I was growing up. She would come home and tell me stories about her day. A lot of these were wild stories, really unfair experiences that she had. I guess you could say she kind of vented to me when she'd come home from work each day. She worked for the longest time at the Salvation Army store as a cashier, but she worked many other low-wage retail stores as well, many of which have now closed down after the retail apocalypse. She also kept notebooks with her and would write down her experiences. Now, it's okay for me to disclose about my mother. My mother graduated with a D- average in high school and did not go to college. I'm a first-generation college student, but my mother was very diligent in recording her working experiences, kind of wanting to record the proof of the negative experiences she had while she was in the workplace. And this really had an impact on me. But she kept these notebooks and was writing down information about her work days. And I guess you could say she was an autoethnographer and didn't know it. So I didn't understand why her job experiences were so crummy, to be frank. In my eyes, my mother was a very hard worker and a really kind person. It made me really frustrated, growing up hearing these experiences. So fast forward to when I was a PhD student at Syracuse University, and I had a wonderful mentor who I already mentioned, Dr. Gretchen Purser. And I had imposter syndrome for the first few years there in that PhD program, but it was Gretchen who helped me realize that my working class roots were a strength to my research and not a weakness. And so she helped me realize that my identity was not something that I needed to hide, but could actually be used as a valuable tool in my ethnographic skills as I shaped them at Syracuse University. And so for my dissertation, I decided to design an ethnographic research project on low-wage retail work, coming full circle from, growing up. I see a lot of applause. Yeah, yay, Mom, thank you for your inspiration. And, I still talk to her all the time, and she tells me about going to the dollar store in her hometown and what her experiences are like. So the reason I selected dollar stores as my field site, the neighborhood I grew up in was a rural location, cow pastures, and In high school, they planted a Dollar General right in front of the cow pasture. It was the only store in our, town. And they referred to it as the mall because there's nothing else in my rural neighborhood. And it was really popular, and people were there all the time. And I noticed this pattern of Dollar General stores popping up in rural locations, which really interested me. You could just be, today driving along, sometimes I drive from North Carolina all the way up to Pennsylvania and count the number of dollar stores, and it's usually over 10, sometimes well over 10 on that 8 to 9 hour drive. And I noticed that sociologists were preoccupied with studying big box retail stores, especially Walmart, and dollar stores were not really acknowledged in the literature, were flying under the radar. And so that's how I became interested in conducting this research project on dollar stores. And I'm really happy I selected dollar stores as my research focus, since they've continued to thrive in times of crisis. From the 2008 economic meltdown to the COVID epidemic, where Dollar General made the highest profits ever before, and through the ongoing retail apocalypse, which I mentioned. Bed Bath & Beyond just announced that they're going bankrupt and closing all their stores. Yet Dollar General has been opening 1,000 new stores every year for the past 10 years. And there are now more dollar stores in the United States than Walmart's, McDonald's, and Starbucks combined, which says something significant, right? And so for this, how many Dollar Generals are there? Well, there are approximately 19,067 locations right now for Dollar General, and their growth model relies on rapid expansion, where they open between 900 to over 1,000 stores every single year. And you can see this map here of the black dots. There's 5 or less Dollar Generals in this area, and if there's an orange dot, there's greater than 5. And this is just Dollar General alone, not including Dollar Tree and Family Dollar, which actually merged several years ago and are now one corporation. So those are really the big 3 stores that you'll see traveling around the United States landscape. And so the New York Times declared in 2011, we are awakening to a dollar store economy, which is where I got the title for this talk. A culture of fear-induced bargain hunting spurred by the 2008 market meltdown and jobless recovery. More than ever before, anxious customers are looking to stretch a buck and penny pinch due to the shrinking middle class and widening gap of economic inequality. But dollar stores thrive within this climate of economic uncertainty, and their quiet propagation, as I mentioned, has achieved prosperity for their executives and especially their investors, who have specialized in capitalizing off of economic constraints and, quite frankly, off of poverty and scarcity, consumer anxiety. In urban areas, quick access to cheap goods appears as an oasis amidst deprivation, especially in geographic food deserts. And for rural customers, as I mentioned, my community I grew up in included, dollar stores may be the only store for miles around, attracting customers for a wide radius. And this is not by accident. Dollar General plots travel patterns on interstate highways and back roads. And what they look at is the locations of Walmart, supercenters, and also grocery stores. And if they see a viable traffic pattern, they try to place a Dollar General in that location on the way from the traffic flow, so that they stop at the dollar store before they get to the grocery store, before they get to the Walmart supercenter. So it's very strategic that it's the cow pasture in my town where a dollar store popped up. I'll share with you that my community is near the Flight 93 crash site. And so we do get a lot of travel, particularly around September 11th. And there's a constant flow visiting the memorial site. And so that road that people travel on, they place Dollar Generals, and not just one, several along the way, since that was a rural area. So here are some graphs demonstrating Dollar General's growth that I've been discussing. So Fortune 200 corporation Dollar General has attributed its financial success to the expanse of their target demographic, which is households earning $40,000 or less a year. So in 2017, its former CEO, Todd Vasos, stated, quote, "The economy is continuing to create more of our core customers. We are putting stores in places today that perhaps 5 years ago were just on the cusp of probably not being our demographic, and it's now turned into being our demographic," unquote. So dollar store customers are among the poorest of consumers. The median household income of a Walmart shopper is about $53,000 a year and generally aligns with the US average, while dollar store customers earn an estimated $8,000 less annually. And here we can see some graphs demonstrating Dollar General stores growing, especially since 2008, that economic crisis that I mentioned, and that rigorous growth pattern of adding 1,000 new stores every single year up until this very year. And we can also see their profits soaring, particularly during the COVID epidemic, where they had their most profitable year ever in the midst of the economic crisis. And of course, dollar store workers were among some of those necessary and needed workers to keep their stores running and operational. So to collect my research data for my dissertation portion of this research, I actually worked 6 months covertly as a dollar store employee. I was a part-time sales associate at a Dollar General store from fall 2014 until 2015. I refer to this field site in my writings as Downtown Dollar General because it was in a deindustrialized urban community in Western Pennsylvania, and the surrounding area had a high concentration of poverty. And in the neighborhood where my store field site was located, there was significantly more Black residents than in surrounding neighborhoods. So there was a high concentration of poverty, and there were more racial minorities, particularly Black neighbors in the area. And I'll add that there was also no parking lot at my Dollar General. That just gives you a sense of how urban it was. There is no parking lot. There's on-the-street parking, which you had to pay for. So a significant part of my wage actually went to parking because I didn't want to park on the side street. Getting to my job, there was only a few spaces in the front that were metered parking, which you had to feed every 2 hours, and I wasn't allowed to leave the store, as you'll find out soon why. So I actually had to pay, did I pay $75 a month or something for parking in a parking garage, to protect my car from snow. So right there, it just, bit into my wages. So after my ethnographic data collection, I did 50 in-depth interviews from 2015 to 2016. And 7 of these were with my former coworkers. I individually revealed myself to each one of them, explained my research intent, and they received it well. They were actually worried that Dollar General was going to sue me once they found out that I was opening this can of worms of what it's like to work at their store. And so I conducted 50 in-depth interviews, and then finally I analyzed numerous documents, websites, and chatted with employees and customers through social media, and employees also would send me photographs of their stores, and we formed an online community of sorts. And so my starting wage while I was working at Dollar General was $7.75 an hour. I averaged 24.5 hours per week. However, my schedule was very erratic and very greatly, and could change, a couple days before I was scheduled to work, or maybe the day of. I completed 607 hours of field work working at Dollar General, and during this time, I also conducted participant observation of the 38 other Dollar General stores. I drew a 70-mile radius around my field site, and I spent my time on my days off going to these other Dollar General stores and observing them as well, taking photographs, talking to workers and customers. So my current research that I've been working on while at UNC Pembroke, I'm looking into the research question: how does the organization of work at dollar stores, the rules, policies, and the technologies that corporate leadership implements, because it's very top-down management approach, how does this impact employees and customers? And so my current research involves GIS mapping, where I'm looking at the violent crimes that take place in and around dollar stores and overlaying that with census tract data. I'm also continuing fieldwork observations as a dollar store customer, and I have 2 other wonderful student researchers who have been assisting me with that. And I'll also share, because they're young women of color, they're able to offer a richer perspective to my research than I previously was able to. So I've taught them, how to do ethnographic field notes, and they've been sharing their experiences. And finally, I've been conducting virtual interviews up to this point. I've done maybe 12 so far with dollar store workers, asking them questions particularly about risks, threats, violence, and what it's like for them, emotionally to deal with being in the store whenever they feel unprotected. And I have plans to create a digital survey with a QR code of dollar store workers as well to look for more information on this. So this is all in the works right now. I also applied to a WorkRise grant. If any of you are familiar with WorkRise, I applied for a research grant to work with Step Up Louisiana, which is a grassroots organization that has a particular initiative for dollar store workers. So if you're interested in that, you can look up Step Up Louisiana as well. And so for the purpose of this presentation and this conference, I decided to present the main argument found in my article, Employees or Suspects, Surveillance and Scrutinization of Low-Wage Service Workers in U.S. Dollar Stores, which was published in the Journal of Labor and Society. So in this research, I identify mechanisms by which the liability model of work plays out on the ground. And in this case, dollar store service work. Now, Dr. Erin Hatton from the University of Buffalo, she developed the liability model of work in her 2011 book called The Temp Economy, and she conducts a historical analysis of labor in that book. The liability model of work assumes a zero-sum relationship between workers and profits. Any money spent on employees, such as wages, benefits, training, and so on, subtracts from the bottom line, and therefore workers are considered liabilities rather than assets to the company. And so for the main argument of my research for this particular journal article was that in the case of Dollar General, employees are positioned as risks to the company and transformed into suspects through a process I outline of employee criminalization. And so through insufficient training, low payroll, task overload, and finally overburdening rules and policies, it's all captured by the 4th, intense technological surveillance, very fitting for this conference. And Dollar General workers are therefore set up to fail, I argue. And this is because the organization of work positioned dollar stores in the crosshairs of suspicion. So my findings demonstrate how work, and especially low-wage work, can be a site where criminalization is enacted and reproduced. And dollar store workers are disproportionately women, they're disproportionately people of color, and they're disproportionately poor. Okay, so this is really significant. My use of the term criminalization, I wanted to note, is based on Latina and Asian American Studies professor Lisa Marie Gacho's definition of criminalization, found in her 2012 book, Social Death, an excellent read. She describes the process of criminalization as, quote, affixing an immoral nature and ascribing a shameful meaning to individuals, which justify why certain people are declared targets, unquote. And the example that she uses in her book is the transformation of Black Hurricane Katrina victims into criminals by the news media. If you remember, whereas white people were depicted by news outlets as finding items in order to survive in local stores when they were going through them, Black hurricane victims were depicted as looting stores or raiding stores captured on television. Or robbing local businesses. And so in this way, the process of criminalization marks socially marginalized people as objects of suspicion, hence the crosshairs I have. So I applied this logic to the organization of low-wage service work at dollar stores. And so I'm an ethnographer. I'm also a professor, and I like to add a performative spin to my presentations and my teachings. So I'm going to be reading some field note excerpts to you. So the following is an excerpt from my ethnography and describes a portion of my job interview for a sales associate position with Dollar General. This was a hiring manager hiring me for this position. And remember that I was covertly conducting my research. Hiring manager Jackie, a bulky white female in her 30s, refrained from asking any questions about myself or my job experience. Instead, she swiveled her chair around to the giant 13-foot wide poster plastered behind her desk, the shrink chart. Jackie gestured to the chart while telling me that 70%, or 7 out of 10 instances of shrink at Dollar General, were internal and resulted from, quote, dishonest employees, unquote. According to her, it was the most serious problem that the company faced. Therefore, an example was, if while operating the register for a shift, her average basket price for the week was $11 with 0 voids, whereas mine was $6 with 12 voids, she would flag me as suspicious. This is because, according to Dollar General's corporate policy, higher voids plus a lower average basket price was an indicator of employee dishonesty and cause for concern. Jackie assured me that Dollar General was adamant about monitoring workers and tracking their performances. If anyone came to this interview with the intention of skimming cash or sliding merchandise to other customers, she'd be on to them. And this is a photograph from my field site of the shrink chart. It couldn't quite all fit into the picture, but this is what was in the employee break room. And all of these papers and highlights were data that was cataloged and tracked on each of the employees in the store. And there are only about ranging from 10 to 7 employees in the whole store, plus the store manager. And the shrink chart was updated weekly with our statistics, our performance statistics, and anybody who is flagged as suspicious were highlighted. And you can see some, pink highlights and yellow highlights on the shrink chart there. So this was largely the extent of my 30-minute job interview with Jackie. And sometimes people ask me, like, what was the interview like? Did you have to lie? Did you have to, sort of subvert questions? And my answer is no. Actually, the hiring manager, Jackie, rather than asking about myself or any of my previous job experience, spent time talking about shrink and employee dishonesty and trying to gauge my reactions. So within the context of dollar stores, I found that the first step in this process of employee criminalization that I experienced began with the insufficient training of new employees. And this was confirmed also through the interviews I conducted. On the first day of work, new employees are led to a computer and seated in front of, mine was a really old desktop computer, for hours upon hours of computer-based learning modules. I think the learning modules, if done properly, probably would have taken 12 hours, but I was rushed to complete mine in about 6. And so there's some photographs here that I took in the office while I was completing these CBLs, or computer-based learning modules, and they're quite dated. I don't think they've been updated in some time. So new employees will slog through the information learning about the nuances of the job, basically in isolation, watching videos and then printing certificates of completion, several of those, in order to be trained. The training videos themselves depicted a rigid, efficient style of scientific management. It was, quite frankly, amazing, down to the most optimal body movements to unload a box of merchandise and stack it on the shelves quickly. So they're squeezing dollar store employees to heighten levels of exploitation in this scientific management way, stocking shelves, bringing up and bagging merchandise, assisting customers, cleaning, maintaining the store, and even dealing with robberies was all depicted in this type of scientific management way. Prescribed code of behavior for basically every single situation that you're going to encounter. I also learned during this computer-based training that Dollar General typically staffed 2 workers to operate the entire store per shift, and was often too busy to invest in training new workers. So another reason training was conducted this way was because in the store that I worked in, there was usually a manager on duty and one other cashier. On stocking day, they might schedule hours for one other employee to come in, part-time, maybe 5 hours or 3 hours to try to get some merchandise moved onto the shelves, but that's it, very limited. And so nobody was really available to train me side by side. The training occurred through the CBLs instead. And so the following is a field note excerpt that describes the extent of my training on the cash register right after I finished completing the 6 hours of CBLs in the office. After being thoroughly zombified by the CBLs, I was promptly thrust in front of the cash register. Rather than train me himself, my manager, Stuart, a white store manager in his late 40s, left for the day. But not before instructing Serena, a 25-year-old key holder who was also African American, saying, "Make sure she learns register." Serena was visibly put off, turning to ask if I'd ever done cashiering before. "No, never," I replied. "Oh boy," she said, exhaling deeply. Serena and I were the only 2 employees left in the store. A long line of customers had formed and were waiting to be checked out, so Serena signed onto the left register for me, and she began ringing out customers rapidly. I just stood there marveling at her speed as Serena silently rung up customers, and then she suddenly yelled, "She's open," reaching her arm across me and yanking the "next register please" sign from the right counter. My first customer approached, dumping an armful of merchandise onto the stainless steel surface, and I panicked. I struggled to mimic what I just watched in the training videos and whatever I could recall from my personal shopping experiences throughout my whole life. Blundering along, I searched for the barcodes and slowly scanned them. I asked Serena for help about every 20 seconds, and each time she'd pause from her work to coolly deal with my problem. For example, every time I needed to void an item because I scanned it incorrectly, she'd take her register key, stick it into the register machine, and type some type of code for me. I also had particular trouble scanning customers' electronic benefit transfer cards, EBT cards, also known as food stamps, because many of the customers' cards were damaged or demagnetized, so I'd have to type the long sequences of numbers in by hand. After about 30 minutes of this up front, Serena abruptly closed the register beside me and announced she had other things to take care of in the store, and I watched her disappear into the aisle. I was on my own. And so in interviews, the workers also described their training as similar experiences to this. My experience was not unique. And they said things to me like they felt they were, quote, thrown on the floor, unquote, on their own, received minimal training, and an important one was, quote, set up to fail. So the key takeaway point from this is that a considerable portion of dollar store workers' mistakes and infractions, including my own, were based on a lack of knowledge from the get-go. Employees were left to learn Dollar General's extensive rules and policies by violating them. And so the next part of this employee criminalization process that I outline is task overload in combination with low payroll. So workers' tasks also failed to be executed properly on the service floor, not only because of poor job training, but because of the sheer amount of tasks assigned to so few workers. As I said, there's about 7 to 10 employees at the store at one time. Everybody was a wage worker except for the store manager, who was a salaried worker. And basically, he was there anywhere from 60 to 80 hours a week, if not more, putting out fires and, working, trying to get the store afloat, as I'll talk about more later, since our store was a trouble store. So as I stated earlier, 2 employees were typically staffed at the store per shift, and occasionally 3 for stocking or inventory day, just for a few hours. More often than not, just one worker operated the entire store by themselves, with the manager in the back room. Each employee was simultaneously, as I've mapped out here, a stalker, a cashier, a cleaner, customer service representative, security, supposed to be watching for customer theft. Opening and closing the store took about an hour, particularly closing of the store. And the result was a noticeable problems that resulted in the store. This in combination with the low payroll issues of understaffing, working alone, and the erratic scheduling place. Overburdening few employees with many responsibilities. And so as an employee, my attention was constantly divided in conflicting directions. I had many hats that I was wearing at once, and I was trying to juggle between those. The manager on duty would instruct me to finish my job tasks completely because of the workflow chart, but I was usually unable to achieve my work goals because I was the only cashier and the only stocker. And stocking merchandise involve searching the aisles all throughout the store, yet you're supposed to remain up front at the register and keep an eye on the doors for customer theft and shoplifting to deter shoplifting. So the point is that upper management, because of their work rules and policies of the task overload, along with the low payroll of stores each week, the number of hours allotted to staff the store, simultaneously concentrated the amount of time allotted to complete my job tasks. And many types of performance statistics cataloged my daily infractions, mistakes, and tracking the speed and efficiency or lack thereof of worker productivity. And these are a few more slides I added in the interest of time. I don't want to spend too much time looking at each one of them. This is the workflow chart that tells you what staff members in the store are supposed to be doing each day, from T1 Sunday into T2 Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Each day we're supposed to be dedicated to specific work tasks and completing them. And the logging of data was tracking us to try to ensure that we completed these work tasks of core stocking or areas of recovery, restocking, find and fill. And it looks all neat and tidy on paper, but when you actually tried to implement it in a store, staffing between 7 to 10 people, 2 people there at the store at a time, it became really chaotic and I would argue impossible. Here's some of the results of this structured organization of work, which would be aisles filled with rolltainers, which are those large metal carts. The store policy said that they were not supposed to be on the store floor because they were a safety violation, safety hazard. Customers, but because there's only 2 workers in the store, we ended up running back and forth trying to stock and ring up customers. And instead of going all the way back to the stocking room where the rolltainers were supposed to be, you might have been in dollar stores where you see the rolltainers out on the store floor. And that's why. And long register lines was another problem. Maybe the store had 3 or 4 registers, but because of their understaffing, maybe 1 or 2 at the most was operational at any given time, creating long, unending lines. Here's some more examples from my ethnography. This sign, there are no more requests off until we get staffed. But the thing is, we never really got staffed properly. We were always short-staffed and understaffed. And on the other side here on the right side is an example of the schedules that was posted in the back room. My former name was Peter Chakin, so that's me. Was an employee there, and it just shows the different types of changes that would take place during the work week. The schedule changes that would be crossed off and altered, and we get a phone call whatever time of the day informing us that our hours were changed for particular reasons, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So these are some photographs that some of my interview participants sent me about the understock shelves. All the merchandise is in the back room, but we don't have time to stock our shelves, so the store looks empty when in fact all the merchandise is in the back room, right? Or the long register lines was a theme that developed in interviews as well. That was very common. And also with all of the accumulated merchandise in the back, there is more infestations, risks, and clutter in stores, and this is an example of that. Unsightly rat droppings on the boxes that were stuck in the back that an employee found. So this photograph on the left is from a store that was nearby my own field site. And another theme that developed was there's a movement called #PutInATicket. And putting in a ticket at dollar stores means that you're submitting some type of operational error in the store. Something's broken, like in this case, there was a leak in the ceiling and it needed to be fixed. Maybe the toilet's clogged, maybe a register's broken. And for every single one of those operational issues, an employee submits a ticket. Put in a ticket movement started a couple years ago because Dollar General was not responding to these tickets that employees were putting in. One popular incident that happened that journalism caught on to in the news was air conditioning units being broken in the South, and merchandise was rotting and melting on the shelves because it was very hot in the stores. And so this is one example of these types of ongoing issues that would take weeks, if not months, to be repaired. The front door of the store of the field site I worked at was broken and came off its hinges several times. And in the complete time I worked there, it was never actually fixed. There was just the sign on one of the doors, "Don't touch this door." And it actually came off its hinges a few times when customers didn't read it and would pull on it. And it was this large metal and glass door and almost fell on people. So it was pretty scary. And then the picture on the right is our break room, which just continued to be piled with, garbage and all kinds of items. It was, very unsanitary, very unorganized, but nobody ever had time to clean the back room, let alone the store floor. Oh, the memories. And to deal with customer theft, because employees, there's only 2 staff, they started putting up signs like these little signs here where they would hide items that were frequently stolen. So the high shrink items, such as Tide Pods, for example, workers would develop workarounds to avoid more customer theft by taking them off the shelves and putting these little notes instead, keeping them stashed under the register that said, "If you want Tide Pods, please see the cashier for these items." This is more work rules that developed in response to the chaos on the store floor that were like the unwritten rules. If you want this product, you're going to have to see the cashier because we have them all stashed under the counter because these are high theft items. And just some more evidence from stores. This photo that I have on the left was at a different store, but it was the same sort of theme, stealing Tide Pods. And this person was mad because they were stealing individual Tide Pods, not the whole bag. And children were taking them, and about the Tide Pods where children were eating them and thought they were candy. So this is really dangerous. And then the photograph finally on the right-hand side, my store manager would write down all of the items that he found customers stealing. And I'll talk more about customer theft, but this was just one of the notes I found where he'd write down the total, trying to prove basically that it was not his employees that were stealing. The 70% of shrink is caused by employees. He was trying to fight that upper management claim by cataloging the different items he found customers stealing in the time and what they did, and recording it on the videos, cameras, and prosecuting shoplifters. Okay. I also wanted to just mention briefly, I have a 2021 journal article in qualitative sociology on consumer redlining and the reproduction of inequality. And this paper discusses the significant disparities that I found between store quality and customer service in different store locations that I observed. So basically, if you want to check out this article, I make the argument that all dollar stores are not found equal, and that stores are underservice their customers and are really crummy, like the store I was in, while other Dollar Generals are nice and shiny. And I make this connection between geographic location of the store, the census tract data involving the household income and racial demographic. And I suggest that nicer Dollar Generals are located in more affluent communities that are white, and the more rundown Dollar Generals tend to be located in areas that are poor and also have more people of color. And I'm continuing this research now where I'm focusing on the amount of violence that takes place in dollar stores.
Hello, Dr. Vargas. Just want to give you a little time warning if you can start to wrap up your presentation. Thanks so much.
Oh, absolutely. So To continue on the excessive rules and policies, I've discussed some of them. Basically, there's a lot of, store policies on and off the record books from the employee handbook. Also, in terms of media policies and the unwritten policies that we made up ourselves to try to deal with the different violations and issues that occurred throughout the store. And this is how we were tracked. This is one example from the shrink chart of flagging different employees because they had a high refund rate. So refunds were an indicator of shrink. When a customer comes in and said they didn't want a pair of shoes, all of that counted against us and is suspicious, as well as the abort rate, which means a customer would come up, have several items, decide after we rang up the items they didn't want one because it was too expensive, and that abort would be an indicator of shrink as well. These different types of metrics. And so finally, technological surveillance. All these mistakes and infractions and issues and problems were captured by the surveillance system that was throughout the store. And this is a photograph of the surveillance of the store that I worked in for my field site. And so Dollar General claimed that this was done for the protection of their customers. But what I argue and find is that the cameras were actually positioned on the employees watching their every move, and loss prevention officers, which were a group of like nebulous people I never met out there somewhere in some other location, would review all of the store footage and flag employees as suspicious and report them. And I actually was flagged a number of times for performing too many voids. And so I'll end on this slide here. One of my research participants who I interviewed was trying to do this type of silent protest, stop treating us like criminals and actually do something about customer theft, because employees continued to be blamed for the high shrink and held accountable and got dinged. And this particular worker was really angry about that.